The building stood tall against the dark evening sky, its glass walls glowing softly under the city lights. Inside the wide hallway, the air smelled of cleaning liquid and fresh polish. Mark pushed his cleaning cart slowly, his hands firm on the handle, moving with quiet focus. He had learned to work silently over the years, blending into the background like a shadow that belonged there. His son Leo walked beside him, carrying a worn backpack that had seen many school days. The boy's eyes moved across the long hallway, watching shiny floors, closed office doors, and distant lights. He tried to stay close to his father, careful not to get in the way. This building felt cold to him, not because of the air, but because of how people looked past them. Mark stopped near a large window and dipped the mop into the bucket. Water rippled softly as he lifted it, squeezing out the excess with practiced hands. His uniform was clean but faded, the name patch stitched unevenly on the chest. He straightened his back and began mopping, moving in slow, steady lines. Leo stood quietly, holding his backpack straps. He had been here many times before, but tonight felt different. He had seen people laugh earlier, their voices sharp and careless. He had seen someone wrinkle their nose when they walked past his father. These small moments stayed heavy in his chest. Mark glanced at his son and smiled gently. It was the kind of smile that tried to hide tired eyes and long days. He wanted Leo to feel safe, even here. He wanted his son to know that work did not define a person's worth. "You can sit near the wall," Mark said softly. "I will not take long." Leo nodded but did not move. He looked at his father's hands, rough and cracked from years of hard work. He remembered those hands fixing his shoes, packing his lunch, holding his shoulder when days felt too big. They were not alone in the building. Footsteps echoed from distant hallways. Elevator bells rang and stopped. Voices rose and fell like passing waves. Yet Mark and Leo felt separate from all of it. After a moment of silence, Leo spoke. His voice was quiet, but it carried weight. "We can leave, Dad." Mark paused mid-step. The mop stopped moving. He turned slowly and looked at his son. "What do you mean?" he asked calmly. Leo swallowed and looked down at the floor. "We do not have to stay. I do not like how they look at you." Mark felt a tight pull in his chest. He had felt those looks for years, but hearing his son speak them aloud made them heavier. He set the mop aside and knelt so his eyes were level with Leo's. "This work is honest," Mark said gently. "It keeps us going. There is nothing wrong with it." Leo nodded, but his eyes were filled with emotion. "I know," he said. "But it still hurts to see." Mark reached out and rested a hand on his son's shoulder. He wanted to protect Leo from the harshness of the world, but he knew he could not hide it forever. "We are strong," Mark said. "We do what we must." Leo took a deep breath. His voice shook as he said the words he had been holding inside. "We can leave, Dad. I do not care if we are late. I just want you to be respected." Mark opened his mouth to respond, but someone else had heard everything. A man stood near the corner of the hallway, partially hidden by a glass wall. He was tall, dressed in a sharp dark suit, his shoes polished to a shine. His name was Robert Hale, the CEO of the company. He had been walking toward a meeting room, thinking about schedules and reports, when the words reached him. "We can leave, Dad." Robert stopped without realizing it. He looked toward the janitor and the boy. He saw a father kneeling, speaking softly, and a child trying to be brave. He noticed details he had never paid attention to before, like the worn backpack and the tired smile. Robert felt something shift inside him. He had spent years talking about leadership and values, yet he had never truly seen moments like this. Mark stood up slowly and picked up the mop again. "One day," he said, "you will understand why I do this." Leo looked up at him. "I already understand," he said. "You do it for me." Mark turned his face slightly so his son would not see his eyes. He pushed the cart forward and continued working, each step heavier than the last. Robert stepped back into the shadows, unsure what to do. He did not want to interrupt, but he could not walk away either. He stayed where he was, watching quietly. A group of employees walked past, laughing loudly. One glanced at Mark and Leo and quickly looked away. Robert noticed this and felt a sharp sense of discomfort. He realized he had allowed this culture to exist. Leo sat near the wall as his father worked. He hugged his knees and watched every movement, feeling pride mixed with sadness. He wished the world could see his father the way he did. Robert finally turned and entered the conference room. The glass walls reflected his image back at him. For the first time in a long while, he did not feel powerful. He felt small. As Mark finished mopping the hallway, he had no idea that his son's words had reached the highest level of the company. He did not know that this night would change more than just one man's thoughts. The building remained quiet, but something unseen had already begun to shift. The next evening arrived quietly, just like the night before. The city lights flickered on as people rushed home, but inside the tall building, work continued without pause. Mark entered through the side door with his cleaning cart, his shoulders slightly heavier than usual. Leo followed him, holding the same worn backpack, walking with careful steps. Mark had not slept well the night before. His son's words stayed in his mind, repeating again and again. He kept telling himself that this was only work, that it was enough, that it paid the bills and kept food on the table. Still, something felt different tonight, as if the air itself had changed. Leo noticed it too. He walked closer to his father, matching his pace. He looked around the hallway, half expecting the same cold stares and distant laughter. Instead, the building felt unusually quiet, almost watchful. Mark stopped near the supply closet and adjusted the tools on his cart. He took a deep breath and began working, pushing the mop across the floor with steady movements. Leo sat near the wall, his eyes following every step his father took. On the top floor, Robert Hale stood alone in his office. Large windows stretched from floor to ceiling, showing the glowing city below. His desk was neat, his chair untouched. He had cancelled his late meeting without explanation. Robert had spent the entire day thinking about what he had seen. The image of the boy standing up for his father would not leave his mind. He replayed the moment again and again, hearing the words clearly in his head. "We can leave, Dad." Robert leaned against his desk and stared at his reflection in the glass. He thought about his speeches, his messages about respect and teamwork. He realized how empty those words sounded without action. He pressed a button on his phone and spoke calmly. "I want a list of all evening staff," he said. "Every department." There was a short pause before the reply came. "Yes, sir." Robert ended the call and walked toward the elevator. For the first time in years, he was not thinking about profit or growth. He was thinking about people he had never truly seen. Downstairs, Mark finished cleaning one hallway and moved toward another. His back ached, but he kept going. He did not complain. He never did. Leo shifted slightly against the wall. He watched people walk past, some talking quietly, some staring at their phones. A woman slowed down as she passed Mark and nodded politely. Leo noticed this and felt surprised. It was small, but it felt new. Mark noticed it too. He paused for half a second, then continued working. He told himself not to think too much about it. The elevator doors opened softly behind them. Robert stepped out onto the floor where Mark and Leo were. He did not wear his jacket now. His sleeves were rolled up, and his expression was serious but calm. He stopped a few steps away and watched silently for a moment. Mark sensed someone nearby and turned. He froze when he saw the man standing there. He recognized him immediately. Everyone in the building knew who Robert Hale was. Mark straightened his posture. "Good evening, sir," he said respectfully. Leo stood up quickly, pulling his backpack close. Robert looked at them both before speaking. "Good evening," he replied. His voice was steady, not cold, not rushed. An awkward silence followed. Mark waited, unsure if he had done something wrong. Robert broke the silence. "I saw you here last night," he said. I heard your conversation. Mark's heart began to race. He lowered his eyes slightly. I am sorry if we were disturbing anyone, he said. Robert shook his head. You were not disturbing anything, he said. You were being a father. Leo looked up, surprised. Robert turned his attention to Leo. You spoke with courage, he said. Not many people do that. Leo did not know what to say. He glanced at his father, then back at Robert. I just wanted my dad to be treated right, he said quietly. Robert nodded slowly. That is something everyone deserves, he said. Mark felt his throat tighten. He had worked here for years and had never once had a conversation like this. Robert took a step closer, careful not to intimidate them. What is your name? He asked Mark. Mark, he replied. And you? Robert asked, looking at Leo. Leo, the boy said. Robert repeated their names softly, as if committing them to memory. Thank you for your work, Mark, he said. This place runs because of people like you. Mark did not know how to respond. He simply nodded. Robert glanced down the hallway. I would like to talk more, he said. But not here. He gestured toward a small meeting room nearby. Mark hesitated, unsure if he should leave his duties. Robert noticed the hesitation. You are not in trouble, he said. This is important. Mark looked at Leo, then nodded. They followed Robert into the room. Inside, the lights were softer. The room felt warmer than the hallways outside. Robert pulled out a chair for Leo and waited until both of them were seated before sitting himself. I have been thinking about respect, Robert began. About how easily people are overlooked. Mark listened carefully, his hands resting on his knees. I built this company with help, Robert continued. But somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing the people who keep it running every day. Leo listened closely, sensing honesty in the man's voice. I want to change that, Robert said. And change starts with listening. Mark felt something he had not felt in a long time. He felt seen. Outside the meeting room, the building remained the same, but inside, something important was happening. A conversation that would lead to choices, consequences, and change had begun. And for Mark and Leo, this night would mark the moment their quiet lives began to shift in ways they could never have imagined. The small meeting room felt quiet after Robert finished speaking. The soft hum of the lights filled the space, and the air felt heavy with meaning. Mark sat still, unsure how to respond, while Leo watched both men carefully. This room felt different from the rest of the building, as if honesty was allowed to exist here. Robert leaned forward slightly and rested his hands on the table. He looked at Mark with genuine focus. He was not speaking as a boss now, but as a man who wanted to understand. He asked about Mark's work, his long hours, and how he balanced everything with raising a child alone. Mark spoke slowly at first, choosing his words with care. He talked about early mornings and late nights, about doing his best even when tired. He spoke about wanting Leo to grow up with values like respect and kindness. He never complained, but his quiet strength was clear. Leo listened with wide eyes. He had never heard his father talk about these things before. Hearing them spoken aloud made him feel proud. He sat straighter in his chair, feeling as if his presence mattered. Robert listened without interrupting. He nodded from time to time, taking in every detail. He realized that Mark's story was not rare. It was simply unseen. When Mark finished speaking, Robert took a slow breath. He looked down for a moment, then back up. He admitted that he had failed to notice people like Mark for far too long. He spoke honestly about how easy it was to get lost in numbers and goals. Robert stood up and walked toward the window. He looked out at the city lights below. He spoke about leadership not being about position, but about responsibility. He said respect should not depend on a title or uniform. Mark felt something shift inside him. He had never expected to hear words like these from someone so powerful. He felt both hopeful and cautious. Robert turned back toward them and made a decision in that moment. He said that change would start immediately. He said every worker in the building deserved to feel valued. Leo leaned forward slightly, sensing that something important was happening. Robert explained his plan in simple terms. He said he would walk the floors at night, not as a leader watching, but as a listener learning. He said he would speak to cleaning staff, security teams, and late shift workers. He said their voices would shape new policies. Mark listened carefully. He wanted to believe, but years of being invisible had taught him to be careful with hope. Robert noticed Mark's hesitation. He did not take offense. He understood that trust had to be earned. He said change would be shown through actions, not promises. The conversation moved to Leo. Robert asked about school and dreams. Leo answered shyly at first, then more confidently. He spoke about liking reading and wanting to build things someday. Robert smiled softly. He said dreams grow best when children see respect in action. He told Leo that standing up for his father had shown great strength. Leo felt his chest fill with warmth. He had not expected his words to matter to anyone outside his small world. A soft knock came at the door. An assistant stood outside, surprised to see Robert in a small meeting room. Robert stepped out briefly and gave clear instructions. He asked for a full review of employee treatment and late shift conditions. The assistant nodded quickly and left. When Robert returned, Mark realized something was truly different. This was not a moment of emotion that would fade. This felt deliberate. Robert sat back down and looked at Mark directly. He offered Mark a new role, one that involved overseeing evening maintenance teams. He said the position came with better hours and more stability. Mark felt his breath catch. He had never imagined such an opportunity. He worried about whether he was capable. Robert spoke calmly. He said leadership was already part of who Mark was. He said guiding his son and showing pride in honest work proved that. Mark looked at Leo. The boy's eyes were bright with excitement and hope. Mark felt fear and possibility mix inside him. He asked for time to think. Robert respected that and agreed. He said the offer would remain open. The meeting ended quietly. Robert walked them back into the hallway. The building felt different now. It felt smaller, warmer. As they walked toward the exit, employees passed by and greeted Robert. He stopped and introduced Mark by name. He thanked him openly for his work. Mark felt something he had not felt before in this place. He felt recognized. Leo walked beside his father, his steps lighter than before. He held his backpack with pride. Outside, the night air felt fresh. Mark and Leo stood for a moment under the streetlights. Mark looked down at his son and smiled. "Thank you," Mark said softly. Leo shook his head. "I just said what I felt," he replied. They walked home together, their shadows stretching long behind them. Neither of them knew exactly what the future held, but they both felt that something important had changed. Inside the building, Robert watched them leave through the glass doors. He knew this was only the beginning. Change would not be easy, but it was necessary. And as the city continued its endless movement, 3 lives moved quietly toward a new direction, guided by honesty, courage, and the power of being seen. Morning light entered the small apartment through thin curtains and rested softly on the walls. Mark woke early, not because of an alarm, but because his mind would not slow down. The events of the previous night stayed with him like a quiet echo. He sat on the edge of the bed and took a deep breath, feeling both calm and uncertain. Leo was already awake, sitting at the small table with his school books open. He looked up and smiled when he saw his father. There was a new energy in his smile, something lighter and more hopeful. Mark returned the smile and felt warmth spread through his chest. They ate breakfast together in silence, but it was a comfortable silence. Mark watched Leo carefully, noticing how relaxed he seemed. He realized that children felt change before adults did. The day passed slowly. Mark went to work later than usual, walking with steady steps. When he entered the building, something felt different. People nodded as they passed him. A few even greeted him by name. These small moments surprised him more than any big promise. Robert had kept his word. He spent the day walking through the building, speaking to employees at every level. He listened more than he spoke. He asked questions that showed genuine interest. People noticed. That evening, Mark returned with Leo as usual. The hallway lights were bright, but the feeling was warmer than before. Mark pushed his cart with calm focus. Leo sat nearby, doing homework and watching quietly. Robert joined them later that night. He did not wear a suit this time. He wore simple clothes and walked without hurry. He spoke to Mark again, reminding him of the offer and answering questions patiently. Mark asked about responsibilities and expectations. Robert explained everything clearly. He made it clear that respect came before results. He said leadership was about care and fairness. Mark finally agreed. He accepted the new role with humility and quiet pride. He did not feel like he was rising above others. He felt like he was standing beside them. Leo watched the exchange with wide eyes. He felt proud of his father, not because of a title, but because of how he carried himself. The weeks that followed brought steady change. Mark learned new tasks and met new people. He still worked hard, but his hours were better. He had time to help Leo with school and share meals without rushing. The building changed too. New guidelines were introduced. Evening staff received proper recognition. Training focused on respect and communication. Small actions created lasting effects. Robert continued to stay involved. He did not disappear behind office doors. He made himself visible and approachable. Employees felt heard and valued. Leo noticed changes at school as well. He felt more confident and focused. He spoke proudly about his father when asked. He learned that respect could be built through honesty and courage. One evening, Mark and Leo stood outside the building after work. The city lights shimmered around them. Mark looked down at his son and felt deep gratitude. "You changed more than you know," Mark said softly. Leo shook his head. "We changed together," he replied. They walked home side by side, their steps in rhythm. The future no longer felt heavy or uncertain. It felt open and full of possibility. Inside the building, Robert watched the evening staff work with renewed spirit. He felt proud, not of numbers or success, but of growth and understanding. The company continued to move forward, guided by values that now had meaning. Respect became a shared language. Leadership became a shared effort. And in a quiet apartment not far away, a father and son rested peacefully, knowing that a single moment of honesty had changed their path. The story did not end with wealth or fame. It ended with dignity, understanding, and hope. And that was more than enough.